Welcome, everyone, to the D1Softball Women's College World Series live preview show. I cannot believe that it's already this time of year where we're in Oklahoma City. Some of us actually in Oklahoma City, others joining remotely, but all of us here to talk about softball. So Jenna Becerra here alongside two of my favorite coworkers, the In the Circle men, Victor Anderson and Eric Lopez. And we're excited to talk all things Women's College World Series. How are you doing, guys?
Jenna, I am doing good. I apologize in advance. You're used to working with one of the greatest players ever and many a time over All-American that has dropped to zero now. But we'll try our best.
Well, you're a Golden Knight nominee, Eric, which I cannot say the same for myself. So
I'm not a winner like Golden Mike winner like Jenna is. So again, you're carrying the show. She's the smart one of the show. Right?
Well, we'll bring in some guests too for people, so we can up level this from ourselves, as we like to say. But I think maybe important for us first of all to just talk through what the bracket looks like. So just going through the agenda, actually, first we'll talk about the bracket itself. Then we'll have one of our guests on. I can't decide if we should keep this a secret or not, or just tell the people. What do you guys think?
I mean, if they follow us on Twitter/X, they already know who the guests are going to be, Jennifer. For those who did not read the tweet, please share the good news with the folks who will be joining our show this evening.
First guest is the Ramona Shelburn, Stanford softball alum, also just ESPN legend at this point. Super excited to have her on. She actually came to the World Series last year. She's coming again this year too, to support Stanford, as well as just support softball. So that's exciting. So that'll be our first kind of discussion with another guest coming on after the bracket overview. Then we're going to dive deep into analyzing each side of the bracket. So that'll be us, myself, as well as these two and some D1 folks, just going through some teams, topics that I think will be the biggest storylines of the Women's College World Series. Then it'll be our second guest of the evening or afternoon, if you are on the West Coast like I usually am. Paige Halstead, 2019 national champion with UCLA, also in Oklahoma City, working with D1Softball this week. Super excited to have her back, and we'll get to chat with her just about everything from her experience to today from that national championship. And we'll have a quick wrap up at the end. Lots of good stuff coming for D1Softball too. So if you guys want to follow along, we have all the things to share with you as we go throughout this conversation. So guys, before we dive into the bracket, just initial thoughts of the fact that we are actually here and have made it tomorrow to day one of the Women's College World Series.
Well, it's been a tremendous journey this year. The Super Regionals through the roof, 5 Game 3s, record viewership for the Super Regionals. So there's a lot of momentum coming into this World Series with, I think, the first time really since 2021, I would argue that there's actually compelling intrigue about this World Series. With respect, the last 2 years, it felt like anticlimactic. Oklahoma wins the national title. I don't think that's the case this year. I think you got the storyline with Oklahoma going for a four-peat. You've got a storyline with Texas here trying to, been number one ranking coming off that dramatic Super Regional. The last Pac-12 representation as we know it in the World Series with Stanford and UCLA. Do they come out on top on the West Coast? So I think there's a lot of compelling storylines that we quite honestly haven't had as much in the last couple years. And oh, by the way, we have arguably the 3 best players in the sport in this World Series, including maybe the 2 best, the best hitter and the best pitcher going head-to-head in the night with Texas and Stanford with Reese Atwood and Najee Kennedy. So there's individual storylines and I think some interesting team storylines for sure.
For me, it's going to be the story of what Duke has done with Coach Marissa Young. They've been the talk of the postseason ever since they didn't get a top 8 seed. They dominated their regional and then had a dramatic Super Regional versus Missouri, where they had to hang on for dear life in the ninth inning, and for Marissa Young to finally get that national recognition that she and her program so richly deserve, getting to be on the national stage. And how will they perform against Oklahoma in Oklahoma City in that opening session on tomorrow afternoon. It's going to be very fascinating. I'm sure we're all excited and anxious to see how her team handles being on the biggest stage of this sport.
It was really interesting hearing what the coaches and some of the players had to say today at Media Day with all the press conferences. Every team had a conference. Every team had open practice. Every team was filming different things for ESPN and NCAA media-wise. And to hear what some of them had to say was interesting. One of them being Marissa Young talked about, they've only existed 7 years, but she knew she wanted to come in with her team and already compete for championships right away. So agree with you, Victor. I think that's definitely an interesting thing that we're going to keep our eye on throughout this whole thing. So when it comes to the bracket itself, we can take a look too, because sometimes this actually gets a little bit complicated, right? Because we started off with 64 teams in the field, narrowed it down to 16 after the regional finals, and then Supers narrows it down to the 8 teams that we have here in Oklahoma City. So in the top half, you have Alabama and UCLA going up against each other first, with Duke and Oklahoma facing off as well. First time that they're meeting since Duke's, at least, very first game of the season this year. So some familiar faces for those folks as well. And then in the other bracket, the second bracket at the bottom, there's Texas and Stanford, who have also faced each other before, as well as Oklahoma State and Florida, with the besties, Kenny Gajewski and Tim Walton. So if you take a look at the way this is laid out, you have the losers bracket just underneath those initial games. We'll have 4 games tomorrow for game one, or for day one, which is very exciting. And that's the losers bracket should they lose early on and have to work their way through, which we have seen Oklahoma do before, by the way. So it does Happen occasionally. And then at the end, in the championship series, so it is a best of 3. It hasn't always been that way, but in recent years it has been, whereas it is a best of 3 series to win the national championship, not just one championship game to become the national champion. Some thoughts on just the way the bracket works from you guys, because I know you're in the weeds of all of this stuff.
Well, I said this on the In the Circle podcast. I think Oklahoma got a very favorable draw. To me, that side, and this is why I'm actually a fan of the crossover, because to me, the fact that Texas has to go through potentially Stanford, Oklahoma State, or Florida on their side is insane. Insane. Whereas Oklahoma's got a Duke team that's never been on this stage before, a UCLA team that's good, talented, but young, and then Alabama, which, they found a way. As Pat Murphy said, how many people expected us to be here? Nobody, Patrick. You didn't even expect it either, buddy. So I'm kind of glad there's a crossover to balance things out. But, man, that side of the bracket, with that night session, Texas, Stanford, Florida, Oklahoma State. And, Jenna, you and I covered the media, every media presser, I think, today. I don't know if I got caught up in the whole Kenny Gajewski, Tim Walton story, which has been told many a time, but there was emotion in Kenny Gajewski breaking down how much Tim has meant to him and giving him a chance in his career. And Tim talking about Kenny being one of his best friends, giving him an opportunity. And here they are matched up again. That's a fun storyline. A storyline that I don't think the media really caught on to is Lexi Kilfoyle is for good friends with Kendra Falby. Their families are tied in together. So there's so many fascinating. And then Texas and Stanford playing for the 3rd time this year. They played in Clearwater, and then they played again in Austin. They split, and it's going to be fascinating. Texas, the best offense in college softball, against the best pitcher in the world in Najee Kennedy. So that night session is incredible. And then in the afternoon is, how does Duke handle this limelight against Oklahoma? To me, is the big storyline on that side of the bracket.
Oof, yeah, there's a lot. And we're going to get even deeper into it as we go too. But Victor, when you look at just what the paths look like in that bracket that we just put on the screen, what pops out to you in terms of this time around in OKC?
That Texas, the number 1 overall seed, could be done by the time we wake up Saturday morning. If you look at that side of the draw, as Eric alluded to, they got to take on Stanford in the opening game. And if they trip up against the Cardinal, they're going to likely take on either Keegan Rock from Florida or Lexi Kilfoyle from Oklahoma State with their season on the line Friday night. That's the fascinating part. And with how tightly they walk that line in the Supers versus Texas A&M coming so close to losing that super in Austin. If Texas doesn't shore things up and they get things righted against Stanford, they can find themselves playing for their season on Friday night versus the Cowgirls or the Gators.
All right, hold on. Let's defend Texas here because I keep hearing about, wow, they struggled against A&M and they're in trouble.
Oh, no. I ain't saying it.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You said you were concerned. We have it on recording on In the Circle podcast. Check the archives.
I was concerned at how they played.
Right.
They don't play that.
They played in maybe the greatest, wildest super regional of all time. And I think the positive is they're much more tested now. Both Stanford and Texas are so tested. I asked Jessica Allister in the media availability about this journey. Jenna, you've been a part of this journey. It wasn't easy for Stanford. They had to go to a Game 7 against Cal State Fullerton, which, and fell behind and able to mount a comeback. And then they get run ruled by LSU in Game 1 of the Supers, have to come back and win 2 in a row. These two teams, Texas and Stanford, have been superly battle-tested to get to this path. I think the other interesting plot line here is you've got teams like, for example, Oklahoma State, Florida, perhaps Stanford, all of them depending on one pitcher during Oklahoma City, with Keegan Rothrock for Florida, Lexi Kilfoyle for Oklahoma State. We don't know what the status of the health of the Oklahoma State pitchers behind Kilfoyle is. And then Stanford, Jenna, might ride Najee here through the whole thing. We don't know. It's the old school way versus teams like Oklahoma and Texas that like to go more by staff.
It's a good point. And I think there are some folks who are unsure, could Nigel Kennedy shoulder all of those innings in such a short period of time? Just because she had surpassed her inning total from last year weeks ago. She has much surpassed that last year, having that 1-2 punch, really a 1A and 1B with her and Elena Vaughter in that run in 2023. But this year, she's had to pitch more, especially through conference play. She was managing her innings a lot more last season. This year, she's been throwing a ton, and we saw her throw almost every single inning, nearly 300 pitches within 48 hours in the Super Regional against LSU. So, but now, is that question answered after Super Regionals? Like, oh, okay, she has kind of gained some durability here in season 2.
I don't think there's any question she did. That was one of the most remarkable performances, especially after how Game 1 went, and for her to adjust and shut down a very talented LSU offense back-to-back games. I mean, to me, she's the most exciting player to watch. And I think it's good for the sport that she's in the World Series and that she's in prime time.
Yes.
Last year, it was more under the radar. It was her and Vaughter splitting, and Stanford was kind of in the afternoon session. They're going to be in prime time here. I mean, that game against Texas is going to draw a big number. And I think it's great for the sport because I think she's the face of the sport. She's exciting. She's so well-spoken and has a great smile and has a great presence that it's, we need that in the sport. And I think she's done a fantastic job, with Stanford there. And I think we have some other players here that are certainly want to be in that level, like Reese Atwood, who's had a record-breaking year for Texas and has really done a great job representing that university. So, and then you got the Oklahoma seniors with Tiare Jennings, which there's a great story feature on Tiare Jennings and her family on D1Softball right now with Rianne Podcast. I certainly encourage people to. There's a lot of great human stories here, Jenna, that it's exciting, and players that are representing the game the right way.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I think that's 100% true. And because Super Regionals were so chaotic, I guess is the right word. There's so many different words you could use to describe it. But the fact that we had 5, if necessary, games, the adversity that most of these teams, if not all of them, have faced throughout the season, I think that does prepare you at a different level. Virtually every single coach said that today in the press conferences, the sense that, well, because we were tested with X, Y, and Z this season, like now we're in an even better place now moving forward. So a player that comes to mind is Kinsey Hansen. She said it, she was talking about how, it's tough to live at number 1, first of all, because Oklahoma was there for so long. But then she said it was actually, she called the adversity that they went through fun. And I that definitely stuck with me. But her reasoning was because it made them better. That's why it was fun, So I just think that mentality, sometimes, that's what it comes down to, right? Who wins, who loses, especially who ends up at the very end. But they all have that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's as big of a difference when it comes to that. Certainly experience is different for different teams, but in terms of mental toughness, they're all right there.
And every team, Jenna, has had their own individual types of adversity to eventually get them to Oklahoma City. We look at Florida, we got the young pitching staff. Can they bring it all together? Skylar Wallace, she was going on the slump. I was talking with Kyle Crooks about it on a previous episode, and how Erickson and Otis all stepped up in while Skylar was still trying to figure things out. And look at the run Florida's been on since then. Of course, Duke, you lose a tremendous senior class, and you're like, okay, what is Duke going to do in what we think is a down ACC? They win the regular season, they win the postseason tournament, and they are here in Oklahoma City on the sports biggest stages. So each team has their own individual battles that they had to overcome to get here. And now it's all about who could play the best softball over another week to get crowned national champion.
Yes, yes. And the familiarity, like we touched on already, though, with this first round, the fact that 3 out of 4, we've already seen this matchup this year. But everyone also very much talked about how we're a completely different team now than we were in February, and they expect the same of their opponent. There's certain things that, of course, you expect if someone has just someone who's lights out in the circle like a Nigeria Kennedy, okay, Texas is going to be expecting that and have a game plan against that rise ball, right? But in general, for the whole cast of characters, all of these teams have come a long way in what actually ends up being just a few months, even though it feels like much longer than that throughout the season.
Well, think about the fact Oklahoma State, Florida, the only reason this is their second meeting is because they got rained out in Clearwater. Kenny Gajewski called Tim Walton and said, hey, I don't know, what do you think? Should we play? And they, because of their friendship, they knew each other. They both felt they needed a game. And they got that game in. Oklahoma State won that game, but that's all the way back in February, Jenna. I kind of, it was interesting. Jess Callister made this point in the media. I think it's kind of overblown when teams she makes the case that it's overblown when teams played earlier in the year because there's so much technology now that even if you didn't play a team, you could get film on them pretty quickly, like if you played them before. I thought that was interesting what Coach Allister said in the media availability here today.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And that goes for conference rivals too, right? We saw Alabama, Tennessee. It didn't go at all like how the regular season series went in supers. It's all about who shows up. As somebody who lost 2 super regionals in game 3 in their collegiate career, it is all about who shows up in the moment. And they all talked about too how a lot of things have to go right to even get here in the first place, let alone win the national championship at the end.
And it's not only that, Jenna, but it's the players that you don't expect to come through that are the ones that drive those teams. Look at Texas A&M. Maya Perez hits that 3-run home run in the bottom of the 7th to tie things up in game 2 of that Super versus Texas. It's players like that who are the underlying heroes to get those teams to Oklahoma City, and it's going to be those types of players again who will eventually determine who wins the national championship.
It's a great point. Actually, something that Marissa Young talked about specifically with her team is she feels like what's special about them is that anyone can step up. Like, of course, we're talking about Jayla Wright, Cassidy Kurt in the circle. Of course, we're talking about Claire Davidson, right, and what she's been able to accomplish this year. Amina Vega, for example. But then she was like, but Deanna Jennings had that big moment in supers, right? Like, she's like, so that's really what it's about. And that's why there are 9 in a lineup, 10 if you include the DP and the pitcher and all that situation. So it's definitely makes a difference to have that. I think this is the time of year when those things come to play, though. The culture and what you built, like this is when you find out. That's what Coach Allister said today too. Like that you find out a lot about yourself through this type of adversity, and getting to this point, you find out a lot about your teammates. And all of these teams have seemed to figure something out to get here.
And it'll be interesting to see how it plays itself out. Hopefully you get good weather. That's another factor this time of year with Oklahoma City in play. Mother Nature could play a factor in some of the scheduling with some of these games, but that's what we'll see.
Yeah, Rob from Canada saying they're predicting 10 to 20, I'm presuming maybe inches of rain between Thursday night and Friday morning. So could make things a little interesting.
Listen, when I was in Oklahoma City, not a drop of rain dropped, all right? So it's on you. If you got come on, let's get that.
It sounds like it's on you if it happens because you're not here. That's what I gathered from that.
I heard the word is stuff happens when Eric is not in Oklahoma City.
Fair point. Good counter. Very good counter.
Yes.
For me, though, there's the humidity. You can see the hair already very much affected by the humidity here in Oklahoma City, but we love it. This is what it's all about.
Jenna, this is why your trip to Clearwater was so important, because it prepared you.
The adversity prepared me for this, the way for those teams, because it is the same thing. My hair journey and their journey this season is the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Obviously.
It's true. It's true.
As Florida natives, we can tell you the humidity in Florida prepares you for whatever you need to deal with during the summertime.
It's true. And I do want to we've gotten a couple questions. You brought one statement up there, Victor, but just about, could the weather determine the outcome if it forces teams to play multiple times on the same day, if things get shifted around, especially days like tomorrow where there's 4 scheduled?
Well,
I think it could. I do think it could.
Yes.
With teams like they're dependent on, for example, Florida has been very dependent on Keegan Rothrock. I just saw them in Gainesville. Keegan Rothrock started all 3 games. Ava Brown's like the distant number 2. So if weather becomes it becomes imperative for a team like Florida to stay on the winner's bracket and not get caught in a situation where you might have to play multiple games and be forced to throw somebody maybe you don't want to throw in this stage of the World Series. I think is something that could impact teams like that more so than teams like Oklahoma and Texas that can go deeper into their staff, that have 3-4 pitchers that are capable of starting.
And also, let's remember, Eric, weather helped out the Gators in their run to the SEC tournament, where they didn't have to play their first game, I believe, until Thursday or Friday. And they had to play twice and then win the championship game to get themselves that top 4 seed.
That's who to blame, Jenna, is Justin. He was there at the SEC tournament and all the weather came. So if there's rain, it's his fault. Justin McCloud. Right?
The man is nowhere close near the stream, and Eric is playing the Shelley Carlin role and throwing strays at Justin left and right. Like, goodness gracious!
I think he's a little closer than maybe we think. I'm gonna put him on the spot now, because there he is, Justin.
You see Justin. You can't even get in a room without people throwing shots at you left and right, sir.
I don't even know what to say at this point. I'm just used to it. And
I know.
It is my lot in life. Oh, for me, it is my lot in life.
Oh man, that's funny.
The truth is Justin has no idea what the weather looks like because he's busy on the phone getting messages of any scoops. All right, so he doesn't have time for that.
Meteorology was never a specialty of mine. If I'm outside when it starts,
meteorology ain't a specialty of the meteorologists who actually give us the weather.
Well, if I am outside when it starts raining, I will be glad to report that it is raining.
You go rain.
If I feel water from the sky, I will be glad to finally report that it is raining. And if I do not feel water from the sky, I will be glad to report that it is likely not raining.
This feels like Karen from Mean Girls with her weather reports at this point from you, Justin. But on that note, before we dive deeper into both sides of the bracket, just want to mention to everybody who's tuning in that you can stay up to date on all of the World Series action with D1Softball. So we've mentioned follow us on D1Softball.com and on our social channels at D1Softball. But this postseason, you can also use code WCWS 2024 to save 20% on an annual subscription. So if you go to D1Softball.com/subscribe, register, and you can access our premium content immediately. So that is WCWS 2024. Have to let the people know. We're not great at weather reports, but we're good at other stuff, you know?
Exactly. We won't tell you about the weather. We'll tell you about some of the storylines to look forward to in Oklahoma City.
Exactly. We know our strengths. So let's bring up the first side of the bracket too that we're gonna dial into. So game 1 is Alabama UCLA. Game 2 Duke and Oklahoma. As mentioned, Duke and Oklahoma played at the very beginning of the season this year. Alabama and UCLA, not as much this year familiarity, but certainly everyone remembers that Montana Fouts perfect game against the Bruins just a few years ago. As one of the iconic moments probably at the World Series in a general sense, and definitely for the Alabama program. But UCLA has been on a tear recently too. So when we take a look at these specific matchups, let's start with Alabama UCLA. What are your initial thoughts going around the group here? Eric, you first.
My thoughts is, why do we always got to put the West Coast team in that noon Eastern slot, huh? 9 a.m. LA time. How does UCLA come out? This is a good prep for them, though, because in the Big Ten, boy, they love those noon games so very much. So this is maybe welcome to the Big Ten officially. How do these young pitchers, Caleb Beaver's never pitched in the World Series, neither is Brisky, Tinsley, Terry, how do they handle the stage? I think if this UCLA has the advantage with the bats, Maya Brady's the one to watch here. I think she's a player on a mission. Kind of become under the radar, with the great years that Atwood and Kennedy have been having. All of a sudden, it's like we've kind of forgotten how Maya Brady could easily be a player of the year in any year, and is one of the best in the sport. So I think that's going to be very interesting how the young pitchers for both sides handle it. I think UCLA's defense has to be ready. Patrick Murphy and the media availability, Jenna, you and I were in, Justin was in there as well, talked about the small ball game and the short game and how it's becoming a little obsolete, but he said that's been the key, is just put the ball in play. Tennessee has great pitchers, but our strategy was put the ball in play. Good things are going to happen. That's what Alabama's going to do, is going to try to put the ball in play and use some speed at the top. I think that's a Caleb Bro influence as the assistant there. If UCLA plays a sound defensive game, they should win this game going away. But if they're flat, if they're kind of like a little slow, a step slow, and make a couple of miscues, then Alabama can maybe pull this upset, because it would be an upset. I think UCLA is the superior team. But noon Eastern, Murph and Alabama, they seem to always be ready to play. So we'll see.
Victor, what do you have to add?
Well, how does Alabama, and particularly Caleb Beaver, how do they handle pitching around Shalise Palacios? Because I don't know if you're aware of this, ladies and gentlemen, but Shalise Palacios is the only thing hotter than Shalise Palacios' bat is the humidity in Oklahoma City that Jenna is experiencing right now. How does Alabama handle her, and how does Coach Kelly Anyway Perez construct the lineup where if you walk Palacios, she has someone behind her that can make her pay for that ultimate penalty for pitching around her? So how does Alabama's strategy pitching around Palacios, especially if it's a tight game late in the inning, later on, how does that impact this game?
20 home runs on the year, 7 since the start of the Pac-12 tournament for Shalise Palacios, and then a couple of games with 2 home runs in them, including that last one against Georgia in Super Regionals. So when it's like, there's not a break. Where do you catch your breath going up against the Bruins? Because you got Megan Grant, you got Jordan Woolery, like Jadalyn Alchin has been super clutch for the Bruins at very specific moments throughout the season. It's just, but then at the same time, Caleb Beaver ready for that challenge. She's tough, right? So it's can they get that run support? And to your point, Eric, earlier, Patrick Murphy said his assistants really had to get on him, like, hey, let's do some hit and runs, let's do some delayed steals, let's like mix this up a little bit. And I definitely think Kayla was probably at the top of that list. You're very right, because I know she's a big fan of the small ball. She loved that when she, as an All-American, was on the wall. She's on the wall again, but at one point the picture of her that was on the wall at Rhodes was a photo of her bunting, because that was a big part of her game. We love the home runs, of course, but.
Well, when I talked to her when she took the job to join the coaching staff, she said that's a big thing that I asked her, with the game the way it is, are you going to be the slap game? Is that a thing you want to bring back to the program? And she's like, yes, I do. I want to bring that with her intensity. I don't think that's an accident. I don't think they get here without Caleb Rowe at all. I think she deserves a ton of credit for it because she's the one person that I could see talking to Coach Murph and saying, look, we got to do this. And Murph's like, listens, like, okay. And I think there's something to be said for that, and it worked against Tennessee. Will it work here? I'm not so sure about that. I think it's a different beast with UCLA. But, I think that's what they're going to try to do early on with Kristen White and company.
Yeah, I think having her coaching first base makes a difference too, right? Because once you get there, once you're on base, there's a whole energy about her that she brings to it as well. We see that with Lisa Fernandez coaching first base too, right? When you have the goat over there, like that adds a little bit of pep in your step, right? Once you get on base. And so to see her have that presence there too, I agree with you, Eric. I think it made a big difference. Justin, anything to add before we move along to Duke and OU?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, the thing for me, you kind of all talked about the different facets of it. I think this game could go one of so many different ways. And I think we're going to know which way it's at least leaning within the first 2 innings. Like, I think we're going to see pretty quickly, whoever starts, assuming it's Beaver, maybe it's Brisky. But whoever starts in the circle for Alabama, we're going to see how locked in they are. We're going to see, is the stage a little much? We're going to find that out very quickly. One thing earlier, Palacios and Brady were at the press conference, but you got to think they've done this. Grant and Woolery and some of those other hitters have not. Again, is the stage too big? We're going to find out. You see their first at bat. How are they going to settle in? So I think I think this game could go so many different ways, and I think we're going to find out in the first couple of innings which way it's at least leaning towards, which way it looks like it's going to go. I just really hope it's not 14 innings. I will accept any answer other than 14 innings.
Well, the good news, Justin, don't worry. The SEC teams, unless Florida and Alabama end up playing later in the tournament, that's not going to happen. All right, so don't worry, you're fine. It's only in the SEC that happens.
Well, Alabama really likes their 14-inning games. I've learned that.
They do. SEC tournament, NCAA tournament.
I will say this. UCLA did a heck of a job jumping on Georgia early and just took it to them in the throat. I think that, Justin, you're onto something. Does UCLA jump on Alabama in those first 2 innings and jump on them 3-4-0? I don't think Alabama can come from behind. Alabama has to weather that storm, keep it close. Keep it close, 1-run game, tied game, get to that late in the ball game and try to steal it. That's how Alabama knocked off Tennessee in that 14-inning game. They cannot stay with UCLA's offense at all.
Well,
and if UCLA jumps on them, it's a wrap.
I will throw something out there Patrick Murphy said today. He talked about, and I don't want to misquote him, so I don't want to use exact words, but he talked about the fact that they've relied so much on Beaver and Brisky, and if they can scratch out a run, they're going to win. And, he says that it sounds nice. So I know what he means by it. And it doesn't necessarily mean they only scored 1 run. But if you think about it, there's quite a lot of times that the Alabama offense has not scored a lot. Like, if you think about even that game last week, even that game at what was it? It was the game 3. It was game 3. Riley Valentine's grand slam is it. Riley Valentine's grand slam was the only thing. They didn't score again. There just happened to be 3 runners on base when it happened. So, I mean, I think that's a piece of it too. Like, even Murphy's using that refrain. I don't think that's an accident.
Patrick Murphy's, it's good to hear him talk. He doesn't talk enough. I'm really glad he's opening up finally.
I was very proud of my tweet earlier.
Sarcasm.
Yeah, I was very proud of my tweet earlier because I felt very in tune with Gen Z, because I referred to Patrick Murphy's media riz because it is absolutely unmatched. He just gets it. He just knows how to do it.
Would you like to tell the
non-Gen Zers what that means?
Well, would you like to tell them what my response to that tweet of yours was?
You did tell me you thought it was very hip, or you're like, this feels like something like that you're saying is very hip, and I was like, it is. I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
I was just trusting your hipness in that moment.
I'm learning. Well, when it comes to Duke and Oklahoma, totally different ends of the spectrum in terms of experience, right? Just a 7-year program, first time ever being on the stage versus someone trying to four-peat, right? It's just coming from different directions, but they both made it here to this stage, and they figured out a way to get to Oklahoma City.
Well, on the Duke side of things, they're playing with house money right now because people thought that they were going to stumble somehow in regionals. People thought they were going to lose in supers versus Mizzou. But Duke, they are playing with so much confidence right now. And Coach Marissa Young, and we've highlighted this various times on D1Softball and on our various podcasts, what Duke has done this postseason and with what they're playing with. They played Oklahoma tough the opening game of the season in Puerto Vallarta, so they're not going to be intimidated playing Oklahoma. But I'm going to continue to say this statement until the end of time. Playing Oklahoma in Puerto Vallarta in February is one thing. Playing Oklahoma in Love Field in Norman, beautiful facility, is another thing. Playing Oklahoma in Oklahoma City in late May, early June It is the equivalent to trying to battle Thanos in Avengers Endgame. You got 13,000 people, about 10,000 of them wearing crimson and cream, yelling Boomer Sooner. If you're Duke, kind of like what Alabama has to do with Eric, what Eric talked about, they have to weather that storm of Oklahoma. Because if Oklahoma puts a 3-spot early in the first inning and gets that crowd really jumping, that game could be over before it even gets started. So if you're Duke, weather those first 2 innings, keep the game close, and settle into your rhythm.
Well, let me ask you this. The past few years for Oklahoma, it's felt like they've had all the Infinity Stones, like Thanos. Does it seem like they have all of that this year still? Even though there's been a little bit more adversity, which, by the way, still means about 6 losses. So it's still a different standard that they hold.
Well, it kind of feels cliche, but the standard is the standard in Oklahoma. It's just not as inevitable as it was in 2022 and 2023. They've had their stumbles, of course, but they're better because of the adversity.
Yeah.
They know what it's like to play with their backs against the wall. They know what it's like to have a team punch them in the mouth and how they respond to that. And I think Coach Patty Gasso, one of her media availabilities late in the season, said that they're starting to play like in that championship form that they weren't playing like in the early part of the season. And we have players like Coleman, like a Kinsey Hansen, like a Tiare Jennings, like a Kelly Maxwell, like a Nicole May, who I think's been huge in their postseason run. Kirsten Deal, who's started to pitch well to her expectations. Oklahoma's gonna play within themselves. Can Duke handle that pressure? And again, avoid that early big haymaker from the Sooners and get that crowd really amped up?
Well, there's 2 things here. Does Duke come out in awe of the stage? Are they tentative early? Wow, this is amazing. And next thing you know, you're down 3-4-0. Or do they come out like James Madison did 3 years ago and punch Oklahoma in the face? Next thing you're in extra innings, you get a home run. Maybe Oklahoma underestimated Odyssey Alexander. Next thing you know, JMU beats Oklahoma. I know there's somebody here, somebody that believes Duke has a good chance to knock off Oklahoma. So the platform is yours, Mr. McLeod, if you want to make the case.
I mean, good chance. Don't put words there. I think they certainly have a fair chance of it. Yes. This is not the kind of thing where Oklahoma's going to come in and we're going to sit there for an hour and a half and they're going to score 22 runs and beat them 22-0. Like, that's not going to happen that way. I think the thing about the JMU game, there were 0 expectations. Like JMU was there. They were on a Cinderella run. They were really impressive Cinderella run. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, oh, there's no way they're going to come in. They've got 1 pitcher, whatever else. They did it. It's a little similar now with Duke in a sense, because I don't think anybody's really looking at Duke in this opening game and saying, hey, they've got a real shot at it. They've got a real shot at it. That's really all I'm saying is they've got a real shot at it. I'm not sitting here predicting Duke to upset Oklahoma because it would be an upset, but Duke's got a legitimate shot at it. Duke's no slouch of a team here. Like, it took them to the 9th inning to score against Missouri, but once they start rolling, they start rolling. That offense, that's how they work. So is OU the favorite in this game? Yes. Should they be? Yes. But Duke's not some slouch that they're just going to be able to have their way with in whatever way they choose to do it. Like, Duke's going to give them a competitive game based on their history and what they've done the rest of the year.
But Duke has the bats, right? They can match them. And I think there's questions still about the Oklahoma pitching staff. Is Kelly Maxwell ready for this stage? I know she's pitched in the World Series before, but she hasn't worn the Sooner colors. Nicole May, Vic's favorite. Is she a reliever? Is she not a reliever? What is her role? Kirsten Deal.
Whatever role Coach Patty Gasso and Jen Roten need.
And if you look at their history, usually when they've dropped the game in the World Series, it's usually her starting. So she's got to pitch better in the World Series. They can't depend on just Kelly Maxwell. They don't have Jordy Ball, and I think that's something that maybe Duke can challenge them with some of the bats that they have. But again, one thing also is Oklahoma's left a lot of runners on base, more than usual the last few years. Does the floodgates open there? Does it, how does Ella Parker and Cassidy Pickering, the freshmen, how do they handle this stage too? Because I think part of the strategy this year teams have taken is we're not going to have Tiari Jennings beat us or Kinsey Hansen. Let's see if those freshmen can beat us. That could be part of the strategies we'll see this week in Oklahoma City.
The teams that feel like they have nothing to lose are the teams that are the most dangerous. And that's why these teams always talk about playing freely. That's always one of the goals, actually, is to be able to feel that way, to feel like you're in an environment with your team, to be able to play freely. Oklahoma did that last year, I thought, and we'll look at the results, right? And I think they're still very focused on not being overwhelmed by outcomes, which bodes well. But I think, again, the other teams who are there are all there for a reason and have had to step up. Oklahoma forced that around college softball. They forced everyone else to have to step up, and they are starting to step up. So it is more competitive. And I think even to a certain degree, I think OU is even going to enjoy it being a little bit more competitive because they are competitors. They want to have that feeling. But okay, we're through one side of the bracket here, but we are now ready to welcome Paige Halstead from UCLA, 2019 national champion, part of the D1Softball crew. She is here in Oklahoma City. I'm so excited to work with you all week, Paige, but thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Hi, everybody.
And Paige, is this your first time back in Oklahoma City since winning the Natty in 2019?
Yes, it is. And it's a whole new perspective for sure. So it's super exciting to be here and, watch all these teams play. It's incredible. So I'm super excited.
What were the feelings when you first walked into the stadium today? We were at some of the press conferences earlier, and actually going back to where all the magic happened for you.
It was a very surreal experience. I feel like it brought back a lot of memories. Even going down the staircase into the media room, it was, I remember being in that room and, being in my uniform and being with all my teammates and coaches. And, it's just, it brought back great memories. And it's just, it's a surreal feeling to have. And I'm excited to be there and watch these girls compete. And, I think you kind of realize on the other side of how big this really is. And how much you need to cherish those moments. So, yeah.
Well, we actually have one of those moments in our back pocket that we were saving for when you came on.
Yes.
Right? This is what everybody wants right here. And you got to experience that. How cool is that?
Yes. No, it was, again, some of the girls in the press conference today, it's like you can't really put it into words. And, you work so hard your whole entire softball career. And you know this too, Jenna. It's like you put in work day in and day out. And to finally get to that stage and play with such amazing, my teammates were so amazing. And coaches and everybody, it was just such a crazy moment. And it made everything worth it, in my opinion. So, that moment, you can never get taken away. And it's something that I always talk about until today. So it's awesome.
All right, Paige, I have a great question because certainly one of the topics every time in the World Series is Oklahoma and the fan base taking over the stadium. Mike White was a topic because he said that, he thinks the World Series should be moved. All the coaches responding. Your team did it. Your team actually beat Oklahoma in that stadium. Yes. So you have a great perspective on that topic. What do you think about the topic about that, the stadium, and how to beat Oklahoma in that building?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, no, you're completely right. It is definitely it's Oklahoma City, right? So there's a lot of Oklahoma fans, which to me, I love that. I think it's so great to see so many people show support for Oklahoma and, really all the teams that are there. So I think it's a very special moment. But yeah, it's definitely tough. It can get loud. Mainly the crowd is Oklahoma. So yeah, I remember when we were playing the national championship game, we had like one UCLA section of like our parents who traveled there, and then the rest of the fans were Oklahoma fans. So I always remember looking up to our fans and just realizing, okay, they're really supporting us. They traveled all the way out here, and we just didn't want to let them down. And yeah, if I have any advice to the girls that are playing in it now, is just to it's super hard to block out the noise, but for us, that's what we had to do, and just really pay attention to our fan base, and look up there whenever you have the chance, and in between innings, and really just give them some respect because they traveled all the way here to support you. And yeah, it's a special feeling, and it is a crazy fan base. But for softball, that's so good. I loved it, and I love to see it grow. So yeah.
Pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good advice. Let me ask you this. You know what it
Thank
takes
you.
to win it. You know what it takes to win a national title. What advice would you give the 8 teams in this field? Hey, if you do blank, you can win a national title. What advice would you give them?
Oh man, you know what? There's so many things that I can say, but I think just really staying true to you and what your team has accomplished the whole season. I think that stage is so big, and when you walk on that field, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like a real stadium, and you can't hear your thoughts, and there's a lot of things going on. But I think really trusting and believing in yourself and your team, and they made it here for a reason. They've gone through all the obstacles, and they're finally here. So it's really just kind of trusting the process, trusting what you guys can do together as a team, and trying to block out the noise as much as possible, and just kind of stay locked in. So it's hard to do, very hard to do on that stage, but I know they can do it for sure. So
seeing your Bruins back at the Women's College World Series after last year, which went really well up until the very end. And it sort of feels like almost this revenge tour. At least that's how other people are framing it. I don't know if they're thinking of it that way, but as an alum, to see them back, what goes through your head just being able to witness that, or looking forward to witnessing that this week?
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. And watching them at the Mary Nutter this year, I knew they had something in them. I knew there was some fire. It was it's special watching them. I think they're fighters for sure. And even at the super regionals, we were over there, and I think the respect they have for the alumni, and just who they are as a team is very special. And I remember the last game they won at the super regionals, Megan Grant went over to touch the national championship banner, our 2019 one, and then ran in to celebrate. So it's things like that where I see and I'm like, let's go. Like that's that's awesome. And I think they have a lot of fight in them, and I'm super excited to see what they can do. And pretty much every team here, they're here for a reason. So it's just going to be a super exciting week to watch some softball.
There's a lot of good catchers, by the way, like right up
There-
your alley, of course. There's a lot of good catchers here.
There
Every
are.
team, it feels like, has a stud in some form, right? Riley Valentine from Alabama. There's Carolyn Wang for Oklahoma State. Kinsey Hansen, of course.
Yes.
Jocelyn Erickson. Like, now I don't want to leave anyone out because I've already started, right? So, but like every single team has someone who's really an anchor for their team. So when you watch that at this level, does that kind of bring out the competitiveness in you at all?
Yes, so much. Because as a catcher, you're a quarterback, you're a leader, and I think your team follows you. You really have to be that leader and that voice on the field that you have to instill confidence in your players. And if you don't have a catcher that does that, or doesn't have a good presence, it's a whole different game. So yeah, no, it gets me super excited, and it's a really great opportunity to be here and watch all these amazing players. And obviously I can't technically root for the Bruins, but I'm just excited to see everybody play. And yeah, the catchers are high level catchers, so I'm super excited to watch them play.
Eric, I know you have a follow-up.
That's yeah. I mean, so you have some pride there. Your alma mater's there. Speak of Kelly Inouye Perez, you played for her. What makes her such a great coach? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, feel this might be the best job she's done during her time there. What makes her so great? And of course, Lisa Fernandez, you played for as well.
Yeah. So I mean, Coach she's just I can thank her so much. She's done so many great things for me and our 2019 team. And for her, it's more about the person. It's not necessarily about the outcome. And that was the biggest thing that she always preached to me, is focus on the moment that you're in now, and try not to focus on the outcome or what you could have done. I think she's very, very good in just letting us live in the moment and letting us know that there's no mistakes, and just give it your all 100%. And her saying is always getting 1% better every day, so if that's in practice, if that's a scrimmage, if that's a game, you're always getting 1% better. And she really instilled that and confidence in us all day, every day, pretty much when we were out there. And Lisa, we worked very closely with Lisa, me and Rachel, and I was actually just talking to my dad about this because I remember the national championship game. Me, Lisa, and Rachel would go like in between innings and just kind of spitball some ideas. Like, okay, what are we going to throw this girl? What are we going to throw this girl next inning? So she's always very in the game, in the moment with us, and she's just a competitor as well. So I think she brought out the competitor in me and Rachel and that whole entire team. So I'm very blessed and thankful to call them my coaches. So
you saying that you saw some fire in this team at Mary Nutter, that was a time in which people were questioning the Bruins and like what was going on. It just was a rough start, and they're very open about that and the adversity that they went through. But as somebody who has worn the 4 letters, for you to see that early on, I think is special. And I think that's a Bruin bubble thing. It's got to be.
Yeah, kind of Bruin magic. But I think it's just I think the reason why I thought that is because they were so open about it. They kind of acknowledged that, and they're like, okay, yeah, we got to work from somewhere, right? Like, I think that's what in my mind, I was like, okay, they got this. It's okay. Things like this happen all the time. Nobody's perfect, and I think they're fighters. I think it's going to be exciting. I really do.
Now, you got to spend some time at the SEC tournament. You covered the SEC tournament. So you got to see Florida and Alabama. Alabama briefly, although not briefly, they played 14 innings and then bowed out against LSU. Florida won the SEC tournament. What was your impression on those two teams? And are you surprised that they're both here now in the World Series? I don't think anybody's surprised Florida. I think some might be about Alabama.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not too surprised about Alabama. I think I also saw some fight in them. I think they're a very well-rounded team. Obviously a great coaching staff, and I'm excited and looking forward to see what they do here at the World Series. And I mean, obviously Florida's Florida. To me, I was watching Mia Williams when she hit that home run over the scoreboard. I was like, oh my goodness, like this team's offense is just unreal, So obviously Florida is always very good offensively. But then like today at the Golden Glove Award, they had 2 players up there. So it's like they're also a very well-rounded team, and it's just they're going to be fighting and competing the whole entire time. So they're going to be fun teams to watch for sure.
Yeah, Alabama and Florida. There is a gauntlet in the SEC for sure. And if you look at Florida, they're hitting 337 as a team and they're fielding 976. That's pretty solid for an entire season under your belt with the competition that they've faced throughout the conference and the postseason. So you clearly have that eye for these teams. We should have asked Paige, at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. You guys got to keep me around.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly you got to. Is there a player, and it could be on UCLA, it could be anybody in this World Series that you're looking forward to seeing and you're like, hey, this player can make a difference? Like I remember Rachel Garcia in that 19-year. I'll never forget that walk-off home run against Washington, and then what she did as a two-way player. I mean, that's a unique example. It's one of the greats of all time. But who's a player or two you're looking forward to seeing in this stage in the World Series perform?
That's a tough question. There's so many amazing athletes. And I know I went to UCLA, and I'm trying not to be biased, but Shar has really stepped up to the plate, and I think watching her in the Super Regionals, her and Maya Brady, they go off. And I think watching Shar lead the team behind the plate and step up offensively, I think she's going to be really excited. I cannot wait to watch her, throughout this World Series and see what she can do for her team. And, she's a very strong player, and she has a great presence on the field. So I'm really excited to watch her play and see what she can do. So.
I don't even think that's biased. I think anyone would say that Charlize Palacios is someone to watch in this World Series right now. I think that's more accurate than anything else.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us, Paige. This has
Of
been awesome. I'm
course.
so excited to work with you all week on
Me
site
too.
and all the craziness and get your
Yes.
take on this side of things at the World
Yes.
Series.
I know. No, I'm excited. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Awesome. So nice to talk to her. And just
She's
somebody who's
great.
been here, right? Like you said it too, Eric, even like playing Oklahoma specifically in Oklahoma City, which is always a topic. Like she's just got a lot under her belt in that way. That's so interesting for us to talk through.
Yeah, it's not every day you get to talk to somebody that's won a national title on the very field, right? Like that's pretty good.
Exactly. We, as mentioned at the top, by the way, we were going to have Ramona Shelburn, another alum who has played at the Women's College World Series for Stanford in her case. She had a very serious family emergency just late this afternoon, so she will not be joining us after all. So we're sending her a lot of positivity. And you know what? Maybe we will go ahead and give her the moment that we were going to give her when she came on the show, similar to how we did with Paige. A throwback to when she actually was able to play in the Women's College World Series, because she's one of those people that, works for ESPN, very close with Jessica Mendoza, for example. It's just seeing the full circle moments. There's two moments in particular, like while we're waiting to pull it up, there's two moments in particular that always come back. It's her and Jessica Mendoza basically colliding in the outfield, and Mendoza stealing the fly ball from her in right field as the center fielder. And then in addition to that, there's her, and this is at the World Series, her also scoring. She's on second base. Mendoza hits a double and scores Ramona at the Women's College World Series. Actually, funny enough, playing against LSU, who they faced as a program in Super Regionals at the Stanford Super. So very, very interesting to see it all come full circle, I think.
Mendoza will find the gap, and coming home is Ramona Shelburn. Home to score the go-ahead run. A double.
She was a champ too, coming last year to cheer on the Cardinal. Had one day off during NBA Finals because she's obviously a very big deal with ESPN and the NBA, and came here, first pitch, caught a foul ball hit by Taylor Gindelsberger in the stands. And she was like, this was meant to be. So just want to give her shout out because she deserves it.
Yes.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Her and Mendoza. I mean, that's like you mentioned, it is full circle because that was the golden era of Stanford. Jessica Allister was the catcher on that team. And I remember when Jessica Allister came back to Stanford as the head coach, who was the biggest supporter out there was Ramona and Jessica. And Ramona was a big there and certainly amazing to see those three kind of circle back last year. And that's the thing. She came back on her off day. You mentioned the NBA Finals was already going on. It's not like this year where the finals are pushed back a week. Maybe Ramona encouraged them to push it back later.
Yeah.
But she was able to watch them play, and then obviously cover the NBA Finals. It's pretty remarkable too, that threesome, if you will, with Mendoza covering Major League Baseball as well as the softball version as well. And you've got Ramona on the NBA side. It's really a fascinating group, Jenna, that you know very well.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is. I think not the first time for Stanford in the World Series, right? But last year was the first time in 19 years for the program to make it back. So there was a lot of pride among the alumni. There's at least 25 people from different classes through multiple decades for Stanford softball. And Ramona was one of the ringleaders, right, with everybody last year, as well as Mendoza, of course. But she was a little busy in the booth at the same time, doing a little bit of work that she does every year in Oklahoma City. But Jessica Allister, part of all 4 Women's College World Series appearances for Stanford, 2 as a player and now 2 as a coach. So wasn't a math major, but I can spot the common denominator. All right. I know we're running a little long, but are we shocked by that? I don't think we are. But we do want to start to break down the other side of the bracket as well, which is a very interesting half. I mean, this doesn't don't get me wrong, all 8 teams are incredible to even get here, but this bracket in particular, this is some tough matchups that we have coming up. So Texas and Stanford, we talked about it. It'll be the 3rd time they played each other. They split the first 2 games. Texas won in Clearwater. Stanford won in Austin in extra innings. And then Oklahoma State and Florida, who did meet up, as we kind of mentioned earlier, too, on that Monday, because Kenny Gajewski and Tim Walton are such good friends. And they were able to, after the rainouts in Clearwater, Oklahoma State was in town. They were in Florida. So they're like, hey, can we come play? And within hours, they had a game set up. And it was a top 20 matchup at the time. Pretty impressive just intervention by the softball gods there for that piece. But I think this side of the bracket is tough. What do you guys think? What are your first thoughts?
It's incredible. It's incredible. You've got the best pitcher in the sport who just got National Player of the Year against the best hitter in the sport who could also win National Player of the Year, really, with her credentials. I mean, Reese Atwood in Texas, they've been the number 1 offense. They have diverse offense with speed and power going against the best pitcher in the sport in Najee Kennedy. I mean, I can't believe that's the opening round game. That might be one of the most glamorous late opening night games that I can remember, with the star power that both sides have. With, I would argue, Jenna, maybe the 2 best head coaches that haven't, quote, won a national title. If we did who's the best head coach in college softball that hasn't won a national title, I think these are the 2 best, arguably. And Mike White and certainly Jessica Asser. Kenny Gajewski could have that argument as well, be in that conversation with the job he's done in Oklahoma State. But Texas and Stanford, I can't believe this is round 3. We were there in Clearwater. I forgot that Najee didn't pitch in that game because I was distracted because I got to meet you in person. So that was I was distracted by that. But defensively, can Stanford play a clean game, Jenna, in the infield when they've had trouble? And Jessica Hauser's talked about the young infield. Both of these teams got to play a clean game defensively. I know it sounds repetitive, but you don't want to give Texas extra outs. And as LSU found out, you don't want to give Stanford extra outs.
Well, hopefully the umpiring will be a lot better in terms of that than what happened with the Stanford LSU, but that's another topic for another day. Going back to your point, Eric, about the pitching, it's the old school, new school styles of softball colliding. You got Stanford with Kennedy, who's you're going to get the ball, and she's going to pitch and pitch and pitch until Stanford is done or they're hoisting a championship trophy. Texas, who do they start? Who comes out of the pen? How do they handle that versus Stanford? And Stanford's offense, they have shown that if they can get some runs to give Kennedy some support, she's gonna bring them home. So those first 2 innings are going to be critical in terms of, can Stanford hold Texas down offensively and get some runs early on the board themselves? And for the Texas side of things, can they put up a 2 spot on Kennedy early to get themselves some confidence for whoever they're going to be pitching in that particular game? I cannot recall a opening round matchup with 2. Think about this in this side of the draw. We had the 3 finalists for the National Player of the Year in Kennedy, Reese Atwood, and Lexi Kilfoyle. You got Kevin Rock, who was a finalist for National Freshman of the Year for Florida. You got 2 Gold Glove winners for the Florida Gators also. This is probably 2 teams on this side of the draw are going to go 0-2. And it's going to be a darn shame because you can make the argument when any team that plays right, they can play for the national championship.
Well, Jenna, let me ask you this. You know this team well as anybody. Let's talk about the offense. Was that game 3 against LSU a turning point for this offense? Because that was always my question all year about Stanford was, do they have enough bats, especially with some of the players they had to replace, which, under the radar, there were some talented veteran leadership players that they lost in that offensive side and defensively. Do they have the bats to put pressure on a staff like Texas, or if they got to play in Oklahoma State? That's my question to you is, can the offense support Najee? Because she'll do her part, but she needs the support from the offensive side.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And a lot of people had that question, right, coming into this year. And if you look at even just the numbers, really Stanford has more pop this year and they're hitting the ball more overall. And if you ask Coach Alistair why is that, she's like, well, it's a new team. We have it's a new lineup, like it's not the exact same group as last year. But they've actually literally exactly doubled their home run production as a team from last year to this year, 26 last year to 52 this year. And some of that's driven by some of the freshmen that have come in, Jade Berry, Ava Gall playing the corners there. And even some of the returners like Ali Kaneshiro has double digits, which is the most she's ever had in a season throughout her career. So they actually are hitting the ball more. I think that they were putting the bat on the ball in the LSU series, but they didn't find the holes and hit the gaps until the end there. And then, of course, the home runs certainly help, right? Like that's always going to add an exclamation point. But you mentioned earlier, Eric, too, in terms of the defense. It is something that Coach Alistair has said is sort of a trade-off, though. Like we have a little bit more pop with our bats, but our entire infield are all underclassmen. Each one of those positions has a new face in it this year. Taryn Kern's a transfer at second base. River Mailer moved from second to short. So still new experiences for them, along with the freshmen at the corners. But one of the bats that they had to replace, as well as defensively had to replace, was Taylor Gindelsberger. That's one of the ones you were mentioning, Eric, in terms of she was a fifth year last year, one of the key people to really lead the program into the upward trajectory that it's had. And Emily Jones has done a great job. She leads the team in batting average, and she's never played outfield. She was playing third base last year when she got her time earlier in the season and moved to the outfield once River moved to short, and then Taryn Kern came in into the program. So I think there's a little bit of that, right? Like there's some learning curve with the defense, but they do have more offensive output than they had last year. So
and I'm going to tell that defense going to get challenged because Texas, I thought one of the things they were able to come back against A&M is their speed. They're able to put the small ball, Ashton Maloney, Bella Dayton, Mia Scott even, put the ball on the dirt, make the defense, put pressure on, play on the heels. You saw that A&M didn't handle that. That's how Texas was able to score runs. They don't just depend on the long ball. In fact, Mike White has told me he gets frustrated when they depend too much on the long ball. He likes that diversity of a small ball. That's, to me, where Stanford's defense has to be sound, is when Texas tries to be aggressive with small ball and on the base pads, because we saw against A&M, Texas take the extra bases. Stanford has to be ready for that, and they were against LSU in their defense. They made some great defensive plays against the Tigers until their offense kind of opened it up. So I'm fascinated to see that.
Yeah, I think to your point, the Stanford defense is going to have to rely a lot on their Gold Glover and Ali Kaneshiro, the 2023 Gold Glove winner, behind the plate. Obviously, she is the one who manages the entire pitching staff. But in terms of just being the anchor, calling timeout when there needs to be a timeout and a conversation and everyone take a breath in the infield, she's the one. And she's developed more of that leadership presence in terms of vocally. She's always sort of been that steady Eddie behind the plate, just getting her job done. But she's blossomed vocally this season, and they're going to need that defensively, to your point, Eric. Oklahoma State and Florida, all the personal ties, the fact that the Cowgirls did beat them in Gainesville 3-0, but that was what feels like a lifetime ago. I think of it as 2 seasons ago. We're in postseason right now. Then there's conference, and then that was preseason. So that was like 2 seasons ago. What do we think the key will have to be for either of those teams to set the tone?
Well, what's fascinating is you got 2 teams that are going to depend on their aces here, Kilfoyle and Rothrock. They pitched a gem in that game in Gainesville on that Monday. It was a 2-0 game. Both have explosive bats. Both are young. Skylar Wallace didn't have a good World Series in 2022. I think she's looking to redeem herself here in 2024. I know that's something that Tim Walton mentioned in the postgame in the Super Regionals about that, having given her another opportunity at this stage. Got Jocelyn Erickson, who is tied that's the school record for RBIs in a season. She's been a stud with them. Kendra Falby, does she get on base? I believe Florida is something like 30-1, 29-1 or 30-1 when Falby scores a run in the game. What it tells you is those got to set the table early. Can Kilfoyle and the Oklahoma State keep them off the base pads? That will be a key factor for them. And then Rothrock, how does she handle this stage against Oklahoma State? And who can get into the other's bullpen if they can? I think will be a factor. Oklahoma State, Ivy Roseberry, Kenny Gajewski was asked about her. She's not 100%, but it seems like Kenny's confident that she'll give him some innings. That could be huge for Oklahoma State. It's a fascinating matchup. I expect a pro-Oklahoma State crowd. Keep in mind, Oklahoma State has never won a national title in a women's sport, and they love all their sports. And I'm talking to people in Stillwater, that's a big deal. They love Kenny Gajewski. They've fallen in love with his softball program. Can they get over the hump? I think you're going to have a big Oklahoma State turnout for that late Thursday night game that Florida's going to have to deal with, in particular Rothrock.
I think going back to your point, Eric, about Florida, we talk about Falby and Wallace, but Otis for Florida has been just a bigger reason why the Gators have gotten so far in this postseason. So she's going to need to be able to provide that offense along with everyone else to kind of give the Gators a chance. With Oklahoma State, Lexi Kilfoyle, this is why she was brought to came to Oklahoma State, to be in these situations like this. And I've been so impressed with Oklahoma State and how they've been able to take care of their business like a national seed. Ran through their regional with little effort, took care of Arizona two straight in Stillwater in the Supers, and playing in that late game with that crowd from Stillwater making that trip to support them. And by the way, this is the first time that Florida and Oklahoma State will play in the World Series since 2019. Ironically enough, they played in the ninth session. That was when Sam Schall hit those 2 home runs and shut out the Gators to drop them into the losers bracket.
The year of the bat flips.
Yes, the year of the bat flip.
I wonder if we'll see some bat flips this time around. I would imagine so. I feel like I saw a bat flip on a walk recently in Super Regionals. People just fired up to get on base. So I think we're bound to get
people
one.
will bat flip over anything.
That's right. That is certainly right. Well, so much going on both sides of the bracket, but yeah, this one feels like the toughest road, at least initially.
By the way, shout out to our friend Francesca Aneo. Got out of the broadcast booth, first year as assistant at Florida, going back to the World Series as a coach. Florida's been to the World Series 12 times. She's been a part of it as 4, 3 as a player, 1 as a coach. So the moral of the story is us media people, we can, I'm just, Jenna, you have any, don't get crazy ideas, Jenna, but I'm just saying, if you want to, there's other paths if you decide to get bored with us.
Well, her and Caleb Rowe, right?
This is true.
There's a pattern.
By the way, Eric, that stat you were talking about with Kendra Falby, Callan Dean brings up the status that the stat was Florida had lost a game in which Falby and Skylar Wallace have scored a run. So kind of tells you the importance of those two at the top of that lineup for Tim Walton, and they're going to be especially vital Thursday night.
By the way, Florida, Oklahoma State, yes, people are messaging me, did play in 2022. Oklahoma State won 2-0 in the winners bracket.
That was the game I was thinking of. Probably that was the game I was thinking of.
That was not the Schall game. That was 19 was the Schall game. This one was.
I got the two. Okay.
No one can forget the Schall game.
And Jenna, this is why we love our people at Inner Circle, because they are quick to correct us when we have a faux pas.
Well, the engagement there, like the fandom, is just impressive, right? Like paying attention. Just how much they care about the game, how in the weeds they get, like love to see it. All about that.
Yes. But this is a huge game for both sides, especially Florida, because the loser gets to the losers bracket. You may have to be forced to use somebody other than your ace, like Florida. If you get to the losers bracket, Ken, I don't know if you can throw Rothrock every game. You may have to throw Ava Brown. Same thing with Oklahoma State. If you get to the losers bracket, you may have to lean on Roseberry and Aycock more than you would like, and that's it. That's why this is a critical game. I think it's a big game for Stanford for the similar reasons, whereas I think Texas can get out of a loser's bracket because they have enough depth.
Right.
Stanford, I don't know. Like it's a tough situation there. They don't have the Elena Vaughter type like last year. Reagan Krause has been good, but not as good as I think it is consistent, perhaps, Jenna, there. I don't know if you would lean on her in an elimination game. In that situation.
I think, she's a 20-game winner, right, this season, and, made all Pac-12 again for the second year in a row, all of these things. she is a competitor, and she has been in the postseason before. She was a huge piece to the puzzle in 2022 when Stanford got out of the Tuscaloosa Regional. She has struggled in the NCAA tournament so far this year. Are the capabilities there? Yes. But again, we've talked about how important it is for it to come at the right time, and for it to all come together. That's what has to happen to have success. So that's really what it's about. I mean, Coach Alistair said in the Supers, if Reagan tried any harder, she'd probably implode. Like, it has nothing to do with effort. She's almost trying too hard because she wants it so badly. So it's, can she kind of just take that deep breath for the end of her collegiate career here or not to support Kennedy? Because she did support Kennedy. They won every series except for when they got swept by UCLA in the Pac-12. And you can't do that without a Reagan Krause. Will that show up in Oklahoma City? That's the question. Well, we've been talking about the bracket a ton, as we should. Obviously, it's literally why we're here. But don't forget about our bracket challenge as well. So you can see where your bracket stands before the Women's College World Series starts. The 2024 D1 Softball Bracket Challenge is presented by our friends at Chinook Seedery. So visit bracket-challenge.d1softball.com to see where your bracket ranks. By the way, Chinook Seedery sent some of us a bunch of sunflower seeds, and my nephew who plays baseball is enjoying them at this point. It's been a nice little collection.
Hey, Jenna, Eric and I have been on the team for going on almost 3 months now, and we have not received our welcoming gift from our sponsors. So Eric, who do we need to talk to make that happen, sir?
Hey, I'm good. I'm a team player. Let Jenna deserves to get the things first. She's a star. She's a way better person than the two of us combined. She deserves every accolade and every.
Yeah, but we deserve product.
You do, and I think you will. This was earlier. This actually might have even been before you guys officially.
This is prior to our arrival.
Yes.
Listen. Me meeting Jenna in Clearwater was right. That's it. That's all I needed. I was good. I'm good. The rest of the year was good.
Happy to help.
Oh, did you mention baseball? I mean, it's what a time of year. We got college baseball going on, Jen.
No, great point, because what a time of year, exactly. So Amanda Lorenz, as we all know, is my co-host for the D1 Softball podcast, and she would love to be here, especially to root on her Gators. But her husband works for Clemson Baseball, and they're hosting regionals for baseball this weekend because the NCAA Division I Baseball Championship gets underway literally this weekend, and D1Baseball.com has you covered with in-depth previews of all 16 regionals. So you can follow along all postseason as D1 brings you unparalleled coverage on the road to Omaha. Subscribe today and you can get 24% off any subscription with the code 24season as well. That's 24season.
Use the code, people.
Use the code. I mean, we're talking Oklahoma City. We're talking Omaha.
It's a great time. Kendall Rogers, Aaron Fitton Company, breaking it down. Mark Etheridge. Great article. They did their podcast. Aaron Fitt. People think I go after the committee members. Man, Aaron Fitt was going off.
Aaron had a fit.
Props to him.
Coming from a Stanford alum, I do think Cal baseball deserved to be in the tournament, and that's all I'll say about that.
There are a lot of grievances that were aired.
Yeah, there's plenty, and you can follow it all along on D1Baseball.com as well. But as we wrap up, wanted to get from each of you, and I'll contribute as well, but if you could describe the Women's College World Series in one word, what would that be? I can go first since I'm putting you on the spot. Okay.
Well, I'll go electric. I will go electric. It is, to me, it is the biggest stage, one of the biggest stages in the sport. Like, this has become a primetime event. Watch. For casual people, it will draw millions of viewers. And if you're there in person, it's an electric atmosphere. There's nothing like it with respect to the College Cup, the volleyball, you can pick all the sporting events you want, bowl games. It doesn't come as electric as this College World Series. It's a special event, and I think electric would be the word I would describe.
I respect that. Also, may or may not have been planning to use that one myself. So thank you for that, Eric. But
great minds think alike, Jenna. Great minds think alike.
Victor, thoughts?
Since I have to limit it to one word, I will say magical because when you're there, you're like for NASCAR fans is going to Daytona. For basketball fans, it's going to Madison Square Garden. For baseball fans, it's either Yankee Stadium, Fenway Park, or Wrigley Field. For softball fans, it's Oklahoma City. And when you're in that stadium, you realize the greats of the greats have been on that field battling for a national championship. And to just be in that area, in the presence of that aura, is just remarkable. And I remember the first time I went there in 2019, it was something that I could never. I was like, wow, I'm actually here. I'm here. And you no matter how many times you go there, and you never get tired of it.
The other word that I had in mind, Victor. So thank you both from In the Circle.
I hope you had a third word on standby, Jenna.
Of course, I'm a planner. I did. Not an adjective, but a noun. I would say just eruption, because after my experience last year at the Women's College World Series, that's what it felt like. It felt like an eruption of the fans, the literal roar of the crowds, and all the different games, obviously, especially for the Oklahoma schools with their fans being in town. But the alumni bases, it just felt like everything erupted in such a beautiful way. And that is sort of what it feels like every single year that we get to do this. It feels special every time because of that happening. So I will pivot and I'll make adjustments, right? That's what we do in softball. We make adjustments. So I will make that adjustment.
We make adjustments is key. We get better.
It's a bucket list event. I keep telling people, like, if you're a casual fan, you got to go at some point.
Yes. Agreed. Absolutely agree. I was coming this year, no matter what. I had decided way back when. I think I even decided last year. I was like, I'm going to go no matter what. Just so happened Stanford went last year and they went this year. So for the alum and me, that's great. But even just from the media side and just being a fan of the game, to your point, Eric, like, absolutely just worth it. Well, thank you all for joining us on the D1 Softball Women's College World Series live preview show. We're going to be sharing a lot of content throughout the entire Women's College World Series, from In the Circle, from these guys, D1 Softball podcast with myself and Amanda Lorenz, D1Softball.com. We have a fantastic writing team with Justin, who was on earlier, as well as Rhiannon Pocky, Graham Hayes. It's incredible what the team puts out. And there's a reason I was a subscriber to D1 Softball before I ever worked with them. And it's because of the amazing work that goes on. So highly recommend following along on the website and all of our social channels at D1 Softball throughout the whole thing.